January 28th, 2026, Bolton Crown Court. An 80-year-old man stands in the dock. He looks like someone's grandfather, grey, frail, the kind of man you might see shuffling through a Tesco Express somewhere in Greater Manchester, picking up a tin of biscuits and a newspaper. But Judge Nicholas Clark KC is not here to discuss retirement plans. He's about to hand down one of the most extraordinary sentences in modern British criminal history. Because this pensioner, this quiet resident of a place called Clover Cottage on a sleepy country lane in Wigan, has just been found guilty of running one of the largest counterfeit drug empires ever uncovered in the United Kingdom. The estimated street value of the pills his operation churned out from a converted stable behind his home is £288 million. Behind frosted windows that no neighbour could see through, police found industrial machinery capable of producing tens of thousands of counterfeit pills every single hour. They also found an AK-47, an Uzi submachine gun, silencers, ammunition tipped with ball bearings, and stacks of cash. The man who owned all of it had won £2.4 million on the National Lottery 16 years earlier. He was already rich. He did not need a single penny more. The judge looks at him. "Despite your lottery win," he says, "you continue to live a life of crime beyond what would normally have been your retirement years." John Eric Spiby is sentenced to 16 years and 6 months. He is 80 years old. He will be 96 before he is eligible for release. For all practical purposes, the judge has just given him a life sentence. But this story does not begin in a courtroom. It begins with a lottery ticket, a quiet cottage, and a decision that most people would never consider making. How does an elderly pensioner build a £250 million drug empire from a stable in the middle of nowhere? John Eric Spiby was never going to be a normal lottery winner. The court heard that long before his numbers came up in 2010, he already had what was described as a significant criminal record. The specifics were never disclosed publicly, but the implication was clear. This was a man who had spent his adult life operating outside the law. He understood supply chains, how money moved, how risk was managed. When the National Lottery paid out £2.4 million to a 65-year-old near Wigan, it did not create a criminal. It gave an existing one startup capital. His home was Clover Cottage, sitting on Lower Green Lane in Astley, just outside Tildesley. Green fields, trees, a narrow lane winding through what estate agents would call a quiet, rural setting. Across from the cottage sat a stable block, the kind of structure that dots the English countryside by the thousands. Spiby looked at that stable and saw a factory. He frosted every window so nobody could see inside. He installed a 3-phase electricity supply, the kind used in industrial plants, at a cost of £15,000. Then he filled it with over £200,000 worth of industrial tablet presses, mixers, and packaging machines. The setup was capable of producing tens of thousands of pills per hour. The pills were designed to look like diazepam, Valium, one of the most widely prescribed and widely abused medications on Earth. But they did not contain diazepam. They contained etizolam, a synthetic sedative that is 6 to 10 times more potent. Etizolam is banned in the UK and the United States. A person buying one of Spiby's pills on the street, expecting standard strength Valium, was actually swallowing something that could stop their lungs. In Scotland alone, etizolam was involved in 60% of all drug-related deaths in 2020, 806 people in a single year. The judge would later call it Russian roulette for vulnerable drug users. The recipe for manufacturing these pills was saved on the phone of Spiby's associate, Lee Ryan Drury, who shared it to the group chat on March 25, 2022, while boasting about profits. Drury also built a fake company called Nutra Inc., with a professional website advertising tablet presses and supplements, providing cover for purchasing industrial equipment. Tablets sold at 65 pence each, less than the cost of a packet of crisps. And at that price, With machines running tens of thousands per hour, the money piled up fast enough for Spiby to type a message in his encrypted group chat that would later be read aloud in court. Elon and Jeff best watch their backs. An 80-year-old man in a cottage in Wigan, comparing himself to the world's richest billionaires. But here is what he did not know. Every word of that message was already being read by someone else. By 2021, Spiby's cottage factory could not keep up with demand. He purchased an industrial unit in Swinton, Salford for £210,000, a second sophisticated tablet-making factory. The gang also rented a shipping container on Chaddock Lane in Astley to warehouse millions of pills awaiting distribution. Manufacturing, warehousing, distribution. 3 pillars of a legitimate business, repurposed for one of the most prolific drug operations in British history. Spiby ran it with 3 associates. His son, John Collins Spiby, 37, handled operational logistics between the 2 factories. Callum Dorian, 35, operated on the encrypted messaging platform EncroChat under the handle Fallen Soda, coordinating not just drug production, but firearms trafficking. AK-47s, Uzis, Tech-9s, silencers. He shared photographs of these weapons over encrypted messages as casually as most people share pictures of their dinner. And Lee Ryan Drury, 45, ran the Nutra Inc. front company and managed the supply chain. Together, the judge would later say, they operated as a board of control. Between June 2020 and May 2022, they invested over £200,000 in machinery and ingredients. The bulk value of their output was estimated between £7 and £13 million. The street value reached as high as £288 million. And through it all, they communicated on EncroChat, a bespoke encrypted phone service that cost £1,500 per handset, marketed to people who needed conversations that could never be intercepted. 60,000 users worldwide, 10,000 in the UK. According to the National Crime Agency, not a single one of them was using it for anything legal. EncroChat was the fortress that made the whole operation feel safe. It was the reason Spiby boasted about billionaires and Drury shared drug recipes in group chats, and Dorian advertised military weapons to strangers. They believed nobody was listening. But EncroChat had been cracked by French and Dutch law enforcement in June 2020. The same month Spiby's conspiracy began. From day one, every message was compromised. Every drug recipe, every weapons photograph, every boast about Elon and Jeff. All of it captured, all of it stored, all of it waiting to be used. The UK's response was called Operation Venetic, the largest law enforcement operation in British history. 746 arrests nationwide, and one of those arrests was heading straight for Clover Cottage. Greater Manchester Police's Serious Organised Crime Group began tracking the gang in November 2021 using the EncroChat intelligence. They identified Dorian through his Fallen Soda handle and began layering digital evidence on top of physical surveillance. Unmarked cars tracked the routes between the cottage, the Salford factory, and the shipping container. Messages about shipment schedules were matched with real-world deliveries. The gang had no idea they were being watched. On April 1st, 2022, surveillance officers observed Dorian and Drury loading boxes into a rented Enterprise van. On April 2nd, police intercepted it. Inside, 2.6 million counterfeit diazepam tablets, wholesale value up to £7 million, street value up to £67 million, in one van. Drury went to a Manchester hotel to meet the driver and walked straight into the police operation. His phone, containing the drug recipe, was seized. Spiby sensed something had gone wrong. He approached a solicitor and asked him to create a fake lease for Clover Cottage, backdated to make it appear someone else was renting the property. Then he pressured the solicitor to lie on his behalf, to claim he had witnessed the signing. An 80-year-old millionaire, already running the biggest counterfeit pill operation ever uncovered in the UK, now attempting to coerce a legal professional into perjury. It was too late. On May 17th, 2022, police executed warrants across Greater Manchester. At Clover Cottage, behind the frosted windows, they found the full industrial drug factory, tablet presses, mixers, packaging machines, raw chemicals, finished product. Inside the cottage, 2 World War I-era revolvers with ammunition, stacks of cash, and the forged lease documents. At the Salford unit, the second factory was dismantled. At the shipping container, millions more pills. And across the properties, 3 viable firearms, including an AK-47 and an Uzi, multiple silencers, and ammunition. All 4 men were arrested. The operation that had flooded Greater Manchester with lethal counterfeit pills for nearly 2 years was over in a single coordinated morning. The legal process took years. Callum Dorian was sentenced first, in September 2024, receiving 12 years for firearms and drug charges. His EncroChat messages, the fallen soda handle, the AK-47 photographs, the weapons advertised to strangers. All of it sealed his fate long before the Spibys saw the inside of a courtroom. The Spibys went to trial in November 2025. Both denied everything. Father and son, side by side in the dock, maintaining their innocence through every day of proceedings. Their defense argued that Dorian was the real mastermind, quoting his own EncroChat messages. The guy whose gaff we use is a millionaire. The jury was asked to believe that a man who paid for 3-phase electricity, invested hundreds of thousands in equipment, purchased a second factory, forged lease documents, pressured a solicitor into potential perjury, and boasted about rivaling billionaires was merely an innocent landlord who happened to live next door to a drug factory. They did not believe it. Both Spibys were found guilty on all counts. Lee Drury, faced with the overwhelming weight of evidence, the recipe on his phone, the fake company, the van he was observed loading with 2.6 million pills, changed his plea to guilty midway through the trial. On January 28, 2026, Judge Nicholas Clark, KC, delivered the sentences. He told the men they had operated as a board of control, and that their operation was the largest production of drugs of this nature ever uncovered. He spoke about the victims, people who thought they were buying medicine and were instead buying something up to 10 times stronger. People whose lives were reduced to a coin flip every time they swallowed a 65-pence pill. He called it untold harm. Spiby Sr., 16 years and 6 months. His son, 9 years. Drury, 9 years and 9 months. Combined with Dorian's 12, the 4 men received a collective 47 years in prison. 47 years for a conspiracy that lasted roughly 2. Detective Inspector Alex Brown released a statement that cut through the legal formality. These 4 individuals showed absolutely no regard for human life or public safety. All they were interested in was lining their own pockets with significant financial gain. There is a temptation to treat this story as an outlier, an absurdity, an 80-year-old drug kingpin in a cottage. But the system that allowed Spiby to operate for 2 years failed in the most mundane ways imaginable. A lottery that does not screen for criminal history. A power company that installs industrial electricity in a rural stable without asking why. And a healthcare system that restricts benzodiazepine access so aggressively that it creates a multi-100 million pound black market for counterfeit alternatives. In 2022, nearly 1 in 4 tablets sold as diazepam on UK streets actually contained etizolam. 1 in 4. That is not a niche problem. That is an epidemic hiding in plain sight. Spiby is in prison. His factories are shut down. His EncroChat messages have been read aloud in open court. The man who said Elon and Jeff should watch their backs will spend what remains of his life watching his own. But the demand that made his empire possible has not gone anywhere. Somewhere right now, in a building that looks perfectly innocent from the outside, someone else is pressing pills. Someone else is frosting windows. Someone else is calculating the profit margin on a substance that has already killed thousands. Money does not change who you are. It reveals who you are. Give a career criminal £2.4 million and he will build a drug factory in his stable, frost the windows, traffic AK-47s through encrypted apps, and compare himself to the richest men on earth while flooding the streets with pills that kill people. Clover Cottage still sits on Lower Green Lane in Astley. The stables still stand across the way, and if you drove past it today, you would see nothing. Just a quiet English cottage on a quiet English lane. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. Now, the encrypted app that Spiby thought was keeping him safe had already been hacked before he sent his first message. And the story of how police cracked the unhackable criminal network is even more incredible than this one.